Next up to the stage is actor Dawn-Lyen Gardner, who currently stars as Charlie Bordelon in the critically acclaimed hit TV show Queen Sugar. The show was created by Ava DuVernay and executive produced by Oprah Winfrey. I've heard of both of those women. She is a native Angelino and former teaching artist. Her advocacy work has long intersected with her artist work, ranging from youth arts empowerment to racial justice organizing towards gender equity issues. She's a member of social justice collective Harness, founded by America Ferrera, Ryan Piers-Wilson, and Wilder Valderrama in response to the 2016 election, whose members work to center marginalized communities in pop culture. In 2018, Dawn-Lyen became an official ambassador for women's empowerment organization Women for Women International. She is currently in production in the 4th season of Queen Sugar in New Orleans, Louisiana. Dawn will be joining us shortly. Yes, you can clap it up. And please welcome to the stage our next panelist, Dawn-Lyen Gardner.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Dawn Lyn Gardner, and I am a former teaching artist and current actor, blessed to be playing a dream role named Charlie Bordelon on a dream TV show named Queen Sugar. I am truly pleased and honored to be with you here today. And before I do anything else, I really do want to thank John A. Powell and his team for inviting me. Especially for today's program and panel, they were amazingly patient and waiting until I could confirm that my shooting schedule would allow for my absence today. So thanks to my Queen Sugar family, who basically let me come. It's a welcome breath in a very intense 4th season, so stay tuned for June 12th when we premiere Shameless Plug. But really, it really is a dream for me to be here. I've actually known about this conference for about 4 years now. I remember exactly where I was when I heard about it. I was on a long walk from the 161st Street stop of the D train in the Bronx, and I was headed to that big shopping complex with the Target and the Bed Bath & Beyond and the stuff. And I was planning to grab some things that I needed for an apartment that I'd moved into in Harlem about a year earlier. And knowing that it would be a long walk to and from the train, and being a native Angelino, I am always trying to reduce my walking time as much as possible. So I knew that it was going to be a long walk, and I was looking for the shortest sort of way to make that happen. And I anticipated I might have some bags and it might slow me down and all that, so I popped in my earbuds and I turned to a podcast that I loved, that I still love, and it's Krista Tippett's On Being podcast. Yes, absolutely. And the most recent episode started playing, featuring a guest that was then unknown to me, Professor John A. Powell. And it really is. And from the first moments of the episode, which included words like, race is a little bit like gravity, I was rapt. I stopped thinking about anything else. I just wandered around Target, mindlessly, unable to shop or do much of anything except just take in this brilliant, game-changing conversation for me. And I didn't realize then that I was really screaming for it, even though it wasn't a conversation that I was necessarily new to. 10 years earlier, I was working and living in Los Angeles, where I am very proudly from. Yes, indeed. We get a bad rap, but we're amazing, so whatever. The natives, whatever. So I was deeply steeped in social and racial justice work, some of it through teaching artist work, which was mostly in South LA, one of my home communities, but also through some other activist-y organizations, including a short-lived one called the Racial Justice Alliance. And that was born out of the effort to create accountability from a group that is still going in LA called AWARE, which stands for the Alliance for White Anti-Racists Everywhere. My engagement in that work was the blooming, really, of a racial and social justice awareness that had been seeded in high school for me and was finding its soil in student activism during the Bush-Gore election. And by college, it had really developed into a viable alternative to the life in the arts that I was choosing. I deeply debated throughout my second year at Juilliard. I was really at a crossroads whether or not I should leave the school, which I was learning to love this craft of the thing that I love to do, acting, and claim ownership of this thing that I felt was calling me to engage with the world directly with all of its complications and its issues, activism. But at the end of that year, I did stay at Juilliard, and I stayed an actor, reasoning that my art would be my activism. In art, I felt, I could not only question the systems and the assumptions by which we live our lives, but I could investigate the corners of my soul and share how those two things interact and intersect. And that the very act of committing to being an artist was something of a liberation, if not a radical rebellion as a person of color. But even there, even in these spaces of art making, I remained so hungry, starving for just the opportunity to unpack race and gender and culture and the inequities of our history and anti-Blackness and on and on and on directly. So, that long walk back from Target became longer and slower, but in the best way. After the episode finished, I immediately followed it with the unedited version of the episode, which is serious, because that's another hour and a half. And I kept stopping to rewind and hear these things articulated, these things that I felt fractured by and whole in, and that I had been searching for ways to make space for them. And when I finally made it home, I looked up John A. Powell, and I found the Haas Institute, and I proclaimed to my partner, I'm going to go study with John A. Powell. So little did John know, my being here was the power of intention from 4 years ago. I think 4 years ago, the part of me that leaned into this conversation was the same part of me that was trying to make sense of what I saw in the mirror every day growing up. And at times what I still do in the morning. I would literally stand there and go, okay, so you look like this because your mom looks like this and your dad looks like this. So that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. And I think it wasn't clear to me at the time that part of what I wasn't seeing was myself. Not that I wasn't seeing Black people and that I didn't identify with Black people, of course I did. But I wasn't seeing specifically half Black, half Chinese people, half Black, half Chinese kids. And so the only place that I saw that face was in the mirror or in my brother's face. And to that day, I think it accounts for why we are so close. We are basically best friends now. But I remember being startled every time that I did see that face in the mirror. And I was in this process of reconciling every time. And I don't think that I'm necessarily special or alone in that. I think we all go through a process of reconciling ourselves, of our world, our parents, and how we came to be in our particular life, conscious or not. For me, though, I remember I was doing it on this micro level of culture. And it wasn't just what I looked like, but it was also what I felt like. And I would have these experiences where I could feel and think, okay, I've got two choices of how I'm going to respond. This is one cultural response, and this is the other cultural response. Which one makes sense? And there were times when those two things were the exact opposite. Like, I remember my mom describing to me sort of a classic Asian proverb, and it's one that she really rebelled against, actually, but the proverb basically goes, the nail that sticks out is the first to be hammered back down. And the lesson there culturally is, don't stick out. To which I can hear my entire ancestral line on my dad's side go, nah. No. So, like, girl, you better stand up. I don't know what you're doing. So that's what I've been navigating and questioning and learning to make room for, is this evolving relationship with identity. In the context of really a lifetime of reconciling, a lifetime of unlearning the habit of othering myself to myself, a lifetime of learning how to belong to myself within myself. And in a certain sense, I really fought to get clear on how I identify, which at this moment is this. I walk in the world as a Black woman, very proudly. My experience is that the world does not see or engage with me as someone of Asian descent. My experience is that when I walk down the street, in the world that we live in right now, I am engaged with as a Black woman. That's the lens that I have. It's the lens that I can speak directly to. And I've had no other model in my life except pride and honor to do that. I literally don't know what it is to walk in the world as an Asian woman. I don't know what it is to walk into a store, what assumptions color those interactions, what happens in people's eyes who see me that way. I've watched it very intimately with my mother, with cousins, with aunts, but I haven't lived it. I can't claim that experience. And at the same time, my internal cultural truth, my internal cultural experience is this dance between both. And they are equally partnered. I grew up with both sides of my family in the same city. They all knew each other, they all loved each other, they all hung out without me. And so those cultural realities are lived, they are in my DNA, they cannot be extracted, and I wouldn't want them to be. And like all partnered dance, this dance that I do internally, it is one of tension, of relief, of beauty, of conflict, and of reconciliation. I'm learning that it is up to me to make space for this dance. And the time that we are in is demanding that space. If I do not fearlessly engage with this process of self-inclusion, of allowing all parts of my experience to be true, to be weighted, to have face and voice and contradiction, then how can I possibly be in the question, honestly, of how do we belong to each other? To be honest, talking about this is something of a risk. To talk about myself at all is something of a risk. As a storyteller, my greatest joy and my greatest goal is for an audience to literally forget about me, to give over to the journey of a character that relies on my body, mind, heart, and spirit, but that is actually not about me or even you. It's about the us. That journey that asks us to take ourselves on and see ourselves in each other, for me, that journey is about the most important questions coursing through our time and our veins, about who we are and who we are becoming, and about how we do and don't belong to each other or to ourselves. I believe in the power of storytelling. I believe that story and narrative are primal in nature, that they have an unparalleled transformative power. And I have seen it in action in community, watched miraculous extensions of forgiveness and confrontation and healing and courage within relationships facilitated by plays and music and films, etc. In the best instances within myself, I've actually felt molecules change and shift and rearrange themselves in the midst of a story. And I'm sure somewhere studies have been done to show brain changes as a result of engaging with story. In fact, as I feverishly Googled John A. Powell 4 years ago, in one of his talks that I came across, he mentioned a study wherein parts of the brain that recognize humanity were shown to light up, essentially in response to story. That's basically proof of how essential story and narrative are to human empathy. And to facilitate that, to serve that as an actor, it's a hard thing to describe how right that feels. To get out of the way, to allow that conversation between an audience and a performer or performance happen, it feels something close to purpose. But I don't have that privilege. It's a privilege that I've heard claimed by some of my white colleagues, by classmates that I had at school, to step back and to disappear. I don't have it. I don't have that luxury. Not now. Like many artists of color before me, I understand that my work is completely intertwined with history, with society, with identity, and yes, with belonging. And in a time of risen white supremacist movement gone unchecked, in a time of media sound bites that tend to de-dimensionalize what people say for profit, in a time of loneliness as an epidemic, and us versus them in social media spaces as echo chambers, it is my duty to be the nail that sticks out. to contribute by voicing these truths, and sitting with the discomfort of them, and trusting through the vulnerability of them that something like the beloved community is still possible. And so, my prayer is that if you tune in June 12th, that you give yourself permission to forget about me and this talk, and to take the journey, to let yourself be moved, even transformed by story, to see yourself and to include yourself. That's the greatest gift back to me. I will end with this story. This talk is called Egg Drop Soup. And unlike the name that the title suggests, it's not a conversation around recipes. About 6 years ago, I was making soup. I was in the kitchen, and I was making a version of egg drop soup. I can't really claim it's egg drop soup. Like, my mom would be like, that was not egg drop soup. But it was some version of egg drop soup, which is really sort of fun to make. And my fiance now, boyfriend at the time, walked in, and he was like, oh, hey, babe, what are you making? And I said, egg drop soup. And he said, what's that? And I said, and this is a quote, you ain't never had no egg drop soup? Just like that. And in that moment, we looked at each other, and he said, babe, I know that you say that you're half black and half Chinese, but no. You are 100% black and 100% Chinese, and that just proved it. So, egg drop soup is not, when you look at egg drop soup, for those of you who don't know egg drop soup, it's not like that very comfortable, wonderful, feel-good feeling that you get from egg drop soup, like chicken noodle soup or gumbo or some sort of stew. It looks sort of weird. It's sort of like these wraithy things floating around in a broth, and you're like, I don't know what to feel as I look at this. And in some way, that's an apt metaphor for where we are right now. We are not in a place where it's comfortable. We're not in a place where things tend to feel and they tend to make sense, and they tend to feel like they're all fitting together. There's no soup that's just making the ingredients all mushed together well. That's not the place that we're in. But I still feel like it's a nourishing soup. It's something that offers us protein and minerals, and it's important that we eat this soup. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.